On March 26, 2001, television history was made when two competing wrestling shows broadcast on the exact same channel at the exact same time. For 80s and 90s wrestling fans, seeing Vince McMahon own WCW wasn't just shocking, it was completely unthinkable. Just 3 years earlier, WCW wasn't just competing with the WWF, they were thoroughly crushing them in the ratings. Under executive Eric Bischoff, WCW beat WWF Monday Night Raw for 83 consecutive weeks during the Monday Night Wars. WCW had unlimited corporate backing from Ted Turner, massive star power, and the most famous wrestling faction in history. So how did a billion-dollar wrestling powerhouse lose millions of dollars and vanish practically overnight? The downfall of WCW didn't actually start inside the ring. It started in corporate boardrooms. In 1998, Time Warner merged with America Online, creating the massive conglomerate AOL Time Warner. Ted Turner had always protected WCW because he personally loved professional wrestling. But after the merger, Ted Turner lost his corporate power, leaving WCW at the mercy of new executives. To these new corporate leaders, wrestling was viewed as low-class entertainment that bled millions of dollars. By the year 2000, WCW was losing an estimated $62 million a year due to bad management and sky-high wrestler contracts. AOL Time Warner put WCW up for sale, desperate to get the money-losing wrestling company off their books. Seeing an opportunity to rescue his former company, Eric Bischoff formed an investment group called Fusient Media Ventures. In January 2001, Fusient Media announced a deal to buy WCW for an estimated $67 million. Bischoff's plan was simple: take WCW off television for several months, reboot the entire brand, and relaunch it bigger than ever. Everything seemed set to save WCW, but then a brand new executive took control of Turner Broadcasting. Jamie Kellner, appointed head of Turner Networks, and strongly disliked professional wrestling. In March 2001, Jamie Kellner made the shock decision to cancel all WCW programming on TNT and TBS. Without a television deal, WCW was completely worthless to Fusient Media. Bischoff's buyout deal instantly collapsed. With Fusient out of the picture and WCW canceled, AOL Time Warner was desperate to sell off whatever was left, and there was only one buyer left in the world willing to make an offer: Vince McMahon. Because WCW had no television contract, Vince McMahon held all the leverage in negotiations. On March 23, 2001, World Wrestling Federation acquired WCW's tape library, trademarks, and select contracts for an astonishingly low price. Vince McMahon bought his fierce, multi-million-dollar rival for roughly $2.5 million, a complete bargain. The news shocked the entire wrestling industry. The company that almost put WWF out of business was now owned by Vince McMahon. AOL Time Warner allowed one final episode of WCW Monday Nitro to air on March 26, 2001 from Panama City Beach. At the same time, WWF Raw was broadcasting live from the Gund Arena in Cleveland, Ohio. Vince McMahon decided to turn the historic night into a massive television spectacle by opening both shows simultaneously. As Monday Night Raw started, Vince McMahon walked down the entrance ramp in Cleveland to address the wrestling world. He stood in the middle of the ring and gloated openly about buying out his ultimate competition. Vince declared, "Imagine that. Fate of WCW is in my hands." Meanwhile, down in Panama City Beach, the mood backstage at WCW Nitro was emotional and uncertain. Wrestlers and production staff knew this was the final night of the company they had built. Many WCW stars didn't even know if they would have jobs when the night was over. To honor WCW's legacy, the final main event was booked between the two men who defined the company, Sting and Ric Flair. Sting and Flair had wrestled on the very first episode of Monday Nitro in 1995, Now, 6 years later, they were closing the book on WCW together. Sting forced Flair to submit, winning the final match in WCW Monday Nitro history. After the bell, the two legendary rivals embraced in the center of the ring out of mutual respect. It was a classy, emotional moment that gave WCW fans a proper farewell to the in-ring product. But back on Monday Night Raw, Vince McMahon was preparing for his grand finale. Vince was scheduled to address both Raw and Nitro audiences simultaneously during a live broadcast simulcast. In the final segment of Raw, Vince walked back into the ring in Cleveland, controlling the airwaves of both networks. He demanded that WCW stars come groveling to him if they wanted a job in his new wrestling monopoly. Vince teased delaying the final contract signing, enjoying every second of his absolute power. He boasted on air, "The deal is finalized, right? All I have to do is sign the contract." Suddenly, the big arena screen in Cleveland cut away to the live feed from Panama City Beach. Standing right in the middle of the WCW ring was none other than Vince's own son, Shane McMahon. Vince froze in shock inside the Raw ring, staring up at the arena screen in disbelief. Shane grabbed the microphone and addressed his father live across both television networks. Shane delivered the iconic line, "The contract does say McMahon, however the contract reads Shane McMahon." Shane announced that he had officially bought WCW out under his own father. Back in Cleveland, Vince looked completely furious as his master victory plan was hijacked on live TV. Shane declared that WCW would invade WWF, kicking off one of the biggest storylines in wrestling history. While Shane buying WCW was an on-screen storyline, the real-world acquisition was absolute reality. World Championship Wrestling was officially dead as a standalone company after 16 years of operation. The Monday Night Wars, which had driven pro wrestling to unprecedented popularity, were officially over. Vince McMahon had won the war, achieving a complete monopoly over American professional wrestling. In the months that followed, WWF launched the famous Invasion storyline, bringing WCW talent onto WWE TV. However, many of WCW's biggest stars, like Goldberg, Sting, and Hulk Hogan, did not immediately join WWE. AOL Time Warner parent contracts paid top stars millions to sit at home, delaying their WWE debuts for years. Without those major megastars initially, the on-screen Invasion storyline failed to live up to fan expectations. Yet, despite storyline criticisms, the purchase of WCW became the most valuable acquisition in WWE history. By owning the WCW tape library, WWE gained thousands of hours of classic wrestling footage. That footage later became the backbone of WWE home video sales, streaming services, and the WWE Network. Years later, Eric Bischoff reflected that losing TV time slots made WCW's demise completely inevitable. Without a network home, no investor in the world could have saved the company from corporate execution. March 26, 2001 remains one of the most historic dates in broadcast television history. It marked the end of an era that transformed professional wrestling into a global pop culture phenomenon. The Monday Night Wars pushed both companies to creative heights that have never been replicated since. While WCW as a company ceased to exist, its legacy lives on forever in wrestling lore. The night WCW died wasn't just the end of a promotion, it was the end of wrestling's Wild West era. A single night where corporate maneuvering, real-life drama, and wrestling storytelling collided forever. And that is the true, unbelievable story of the night WCW died.